When it comes to bass fishing, what's on your boat's deck can make all the difference. Every bait tells a story and every setup has a purpose, and I'm breaking it all down. What's on my deck? Let's dive in. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to What's on My Deck. I'm Josh Douglas, getting ready to throw a lot of new stuff at you again. What do we got here? It's April, early April, basically March, April. I have been chasing a pre-spawn bite. Definitely there's been some spawn to be had. I mean, I'm sure like Florida and Texas is already starting to wrap up the spawn here pretty quick. But as I've been moving north, we were in Kentucky Lake, we were around Lake Lanier, where else were we? South Dakota, Chamberlain, South Dakota, and Arkansas, Lake Norfolk. And even here, I've been running across the border to Wisconsin where they have an open fishing season, currently catch and release. Everything's been on the pre-spawn. If I'm running into a little bit of spawn, they seem to be a little bit skittish. But nonetheless, if you're tuning in and you're up north, that's what's going on right now. We are ice out. Ice is out everywhere. We're either waiting for our fishing seasons to open or we're well after it, totally in a pre-spawn. This episode of What's on My Deck is going to be full of a whole lot. Our title sponsor, Shields, my personal title sponsor, Shields, and one of the sponsors for this show, the series What's on My Deck, has an awesome fishing sale. It starts today, actually, April 26th. It's Saturday, and it's going to go until May 4th. Lots of different stuff in here. As you can see, they have all the new stuff from all of today's greatest brands. Sales too, from Z-Man, Shields Outdoors. So many to take advantage of. Check it out. And in this What's on My Deck, we're always keeping it real, but I'm going to highlight a few things that I have been using during this pre-spawn to put fish in the boat. Without further ado, let's jump right in. First and foremost, it's on every What's on My Deck so far. Colors change, setup's been staying relatively the same. We're talking about a Z-Man chatterbait, not just any Z-Man chatterbait. This is an Evo. I really like the Evo. It's got a little bit different head. I'm fishing around wood and stuff. This one seems to deflect a little bit better. Only time of year I'm ever using these orange and reds with these orange blades is definitely during the pre-spawn. This Evo is the 1/2 ounce. This is the regular Evo Pro. I'm using a G Loomis GLX 873C BJR, bladed jig rod. Talk about it a lot. Definitely when I'm around cover, shallow cover, dealing with largemouth and smallmouth, I'm really falling in love with this rod. It has a little bit more backbone to it than the NRX Plus version, which I really like when I'm getting around cover and especially digging them out of the, especially when I'm digging them out of the dirt. The reel I'm using is Shimano Titanium, one of the best in the lineup, hard not to. I'm using an HG, so that's a 7-speed. I don't want to be too fast with the 8, and I really don't like the 6-speed because I am playing with my action a lot, trying to entice a bite, killing it, ripping it out of stuff. Basically anything I can do slow roll to try to detect that bite. I just sometimes just barely want to feel that blade moving to tell me just a little bit of chatter coming through my rod. And I'm throwing this on straight 18-pound Shimano Mastiff fluorocarbon. And I got a little spikes, a little Z-Man chatter spikes. Again, I don't want too much action right now. The water temps in these parts are in the high 40s, maybe light 50s, and that little action right there just seems to pick them up. Why orange, red this time of year? I really don't know. I'm guessing it has something to do with the crawfish. Red, orange might be a color that, you know, big female bass that are loaded full of spawn, it might kind of just straight up piss them off. So that's my setup on the chatterbait. What do we got next? Another one. Pre-spawn for me is a lot of reaction baits. I use it to find the fish. A lot of times in pre-spawn, those fish are gathered up. They're staging, especially the females. You know, they'll stage in a bigger group, start to get in a bigger group, and then move up to the flats, up to the spawning areas as the temperatures and the moon phase and all that gets right. When I'm throwing a reaction bait, especially in the spring, I love throwing a spinnerbait. And this isn't just any spinnerbait. This is a Bassman spinnerbait. If you're familiar with Bassman, they're out of Australia. I'm just throwing 16-pound Shimano Mastiff fluorocarbon. This is just a really little, kind of matches a perch, matches the bluegills, the things that the largemouth are up eating. 2 little tiny gold Colorado blades. It's been kind of overcast. I like the gold blades this time of year, especially in shallow water. And this just fits the bill. It's light. I think it's a 5/16 5/16. If not, it's a 3/8. It's smaller, compact, meant for shallow water, meant to pick up those bites and to move slow. I can keep my rod tip up and really move this spinnerbait slow. Premium components, and again, I'm throwing a rod that I'm just finding to be uniquely versatile is the G Loomis GLX 873C bladed jig rod. If you just followed along, I was using that for a chatterbait. I'm also using it for a spinnerbait. I like it for buzz baits. This is quickly turning into my utility work rod, especially these kind of baits, swim jigs, spinner baits, chatterbaits. Awesome rod, awesome action, and definitely has enough backbone to handle big bites from Florida to up here on Mille Lacs with big smallmouths. And I'm using a Shimano Bantam. I am using a 6-speed here. Again, I mentioned I'm in real shallow water. I don't want this to hit bottom where it's all murky, but I want to be able to hover it real slow through those spawning areas, whether it's just outside where those females are staging, or whether I'm up on top of the flats where maybe the bucks are up there making nests, or all the fish could be up there because that's where the warmest water is at that time for them fish to start getting ready for the spawn. So definitely throw yourself a spinnerbait when you are out in the pre-spawn. Next up, jerkbait. Not just any jerkbait. I'm throwing the Shimano Zimverno. This is the 95. This is the smaller guy. I've been fishing around a lot of little marinas and stuff up here. I was doing this in South Dakota. They have smallmouth, and actually some people were catching some salmon, which is pretty crazy wherever you're at. But anywhere along the Mississippi River, any places reservoir fishing early, right when those fish are going to want to move in, rivers, reservoirs, they're going to move into those marinas first because those marinas warm up the quickest. They're generally lined in rock. They have a lot of docks around them. All those things warm up. They're super protected from the wind and the elements. And this time of year is one of the few times a year that I'm really going to throw around a little tiny jerkbait. And this 95, I like it because it has 3 hooks. You can see I have 3 little Owner STXs on it. Awesome color. It's got flash boost. It's got everything I need in it to entice those bites, and at the same time, this jerkbait can stay a little bit high. And to go with that, I'm using 12-pound Shimano Mastiff. Here in about a couple weeks, when Mille Lacs opens up, I'm going to switch to 10, something that I can get the bait down, making long casts. It's wide open water, but in this case, a marina, you got dock cables, you got zebra mussels on rocks, you name it, boats, everything that them fish can find to get to. So I think the 12-pound Mastiff is just a little bit better, more reliable, and definitely keeps it up off the rock so that if I bang a rock, it pops off it. That's a lot of times when I'm going to get my bites. And I'm going to key in definitely around docks, behind docks, and for sure the points leading into those docks, right where you have your first current break. Those are where those fish are going to stage. I'm throwing the jerkbait rod. This is the G Loomis GLX 822C JBR jerkbait rod. I love it. It's got good backbone, quick tip. It's very accurate, cast far. And when you're throwing around a little tiny bait like this, even when it's got everything it needs to be able to cast, I still like to throw it with the Shimano Metanium DC. This is the XG 8-speed, which is great. I'm using the rod to part the action, jerk, jerk, pause. Jerk, jerk, pause. All of a sudden they eat it, and I want to be able to catch up that line real quick. I'm not using the reel to impart the action. I'm using the rod to impart the action. So for that, I would want that fast-paced speed reel. This is like the perfect setup. I can throw all of my jerk baits on this, including the little ones like the 95 Zimverno. What's next? Swim bait fishing. This is the Shadtron by Z-Man. This is a relatively new bait. I'm going to show you 2 ways that you can rig this bait, but how I have been finding some success with it. In the spring, generally in the spring, I like to throw a swim bait higher in the water column, assuming the fish are going to look up and attack it, especially around cleaner water, like what I found at Lake Norfolk. That was a good venue for it. Kentucky Lake is another good venue for it. Places that they're keen in on bigger gizzard shad and that have some aggressive fish, where Kentucky, we know they have big smallmouth, they have big largemouth, very aggressive, eat gizzards. Norfolk, a lot of the bait that I found was small, but I was seeing big gizzard shad up shallow. And so I went with this bait right here. This is the Shadtron by Z-Man. Very similar to Megabass Vision 110 in one way. One, I like the hook on the bottom. So this is a bait that I do throw a lot. If I'm wanting that smelt, more realistic color, when I'm looking for gizzard shad, this one got gets the bill for me, and it comes in two different ways. It comes in a rate of fall 5 and then a rate of fall 12. And this is how the bait generally comes. I want to show you. It is a line through bait that comes with a hook for the top. If you don't want that, you can rig it down through the bottom tube and put in your own hook and slide it into these hook hangers like so. And that's how I can do it. Now, this will allow me to keep it up, and especially when I'm around smallmouth that are your belly biters, they're going to come up, bite it, grab this, pull it out, and the bait actually gets out of their mouth, which is hugely unique for me, something that I really like to see in a swim bait when you have this much material. Super realistic, absolutely love it. So with this setup quick, I'll show you, I'm kind of using a unique setup for it. Anytime I was throwing this or the mag draft, I like something that's got a little bit more of a parabolic bend on it because I want to absorb the hit and get that fish in the boat. I don't need a ton of backbone. And size is important because I'm wheeling this thing around docks, bluff, around laydown, stuff like that. So I found that the G Loomis NRX Plus 873C CRR Carolina rig rod of all things, and the NRX Plus is like my go-to. I've talked about this Carolina rig rod. I do use it some as a Carolina rig, more so the GLX and the 874, which is one more power up. Handles those 3/4 and 1 ounce Carolina rigs great. Nice sweeping motion with the rod. Awesome. This one I'm using a lot for football jigs. Again, anything that I'm feeling and then sweeping the rod with a big hook set wanted to bow up and keep the fish on. Longer casts on fluorocarbon. So I started throwing this one around, and that's exactly, it's like the perfect setup. It's 7.3, so it's perfect for me for actually putting it in places, not too short, like a 7-footer, and not like a 7.5, 7.6. So that 7.3 is perfect. It's accurate. I'm throwing it on a Shimano Bantam. This is an HG. I want that 7 speed. I don't want to get too fast with it and make the bait wash out, which this one does not tend to do. It's weighted nice. And then I'm throwing this, I think I mentioned, in the rate of fall 5. If I'm keeping it up above their head, I want some buoyancy to the bait. I want to use the rate of fall 5. And then if I am using it on the bottom, I'd want to use the top hook version, so now my belly can rub the bottom of the rocks and feel everything, and I'd want to use the rate of 512. And these do come in 2 sizes. This is the bigger size. I've seen a lot of gizzard shad shallow and up on the points, and basically wheeled around different swim baits all day, this being one of them, and put some awesome fish in the boat. Too bad we weren't able to fish. For the last 2 days, I had a decent first day. Lost 1 4-pounder on a swim bait on the way back to the boat. Would have really had me up there in the top 10, and then they canceled the last 2 days. I feel like my water, I mean, they made a great call. Don't get me wrong. Safety is first, especially when we're flooding that much. But with all the rain, I was fishing bluffs, clean bluffs, and really thought that I had something going on. And that is my setup there. And I'm using 18 to 20 pound Shimano Mastiff on my swim baits. What do we got next? Cranking. I got 2 crankbaits to talk about, but since I only do 9 rods, or do just the perfect amount of 9 rods for these episodes, I'm just going to go ahead and show you 2 different baits because I was using the exact same setup. This one right here, Rapala DT6. I think that's Demon or Red Craw. Maybe they call this color. You can see I'm eating the bill off of the bill's getting worn down on it, and they're eating the paint off of this thing. The second one I'm throwing is an OSP. This is the Blitz Max DR. Usually this is a lot for smallmouth. It'll get deep. It's got a smaller profile. But either which way, I've been using this all across the country. Anywhere, any of those Ozark style lakes, like Norfolk, at Kentucky Lake, crankbait played key. If the fish were up and it was a little bit warmer day, I'm having a lot better luck on the red color Rapala balsa style, old school bait, like what you get out of the DT6. When the fish were a little deeper and we're having cold fronts, I'm doing a little bit better with the OSP Max DR. Now, here's the difference. Both of them are roughly the same size as far as how the size of the actual crankbaits themselves, but the bill is substantially bigger and more aggressive on the OSP, which I was still only fishing this, this was up in like 3, 4 max. you know, from the bank out to 3, 4, maybe 5. This, I was more targeting 5 to 10. And though it can actually get deeper than that, this bill helped it stay real snag free. And also I did a little bit better at landing smallmouths that were off of them shelves just a little bit. My setup for this is a G Loomis IMX Pro 847 CBR fitting crankbait rod. I love the IMX Pro, especially I guide with these rods a lot, and when I'm cranking, you know, you don't want that high-end modulus graphite when you're cranking, throwing chatterbait, stuff like that. You want a little bit milder graphite that is going to absorb hooks and not allow you to feel them breaking the vortex, if you will, behind it and missing those bites or short striking it like they often do, where you just get them barely hooked by the lip and end up losing them at the boat. It was cold, it was frontal. You can throw any of these crankbaits on about anything. When you get down to these light DTs or flat sides, they can get a little bit more difficult, which is why I'm throwing the Shimano Antares. The Antares is awesome. It's got that click drag on it. I like that when I'm fighting fish on treble hooks, and it also casts amazing. So, man, everything just doesn't work so good when it's cold. I'm trying to lay these casts in there accurate, put them right where I want them, and I really think that using these high-end Shimano reels, when you can, will help you cast some of these a little bit harder baits that are harder to cast into the wind. Especially when you're in places like Kentucky Lake, where throwing a crankbait into the current is more important than the wind. So if the wind's behind me and we're throwing it into the current, great, I can throw it wherever I want. If the wind is coming at me on the current, then all of a sudden I have a little bit of a problem. And these high-end Shimano reels will definitely help me excel and still make that big cast so that I can optimize the depth that I want to hit with these crankbaits. So, and I'm throwing, actually the only difference between the DT and the OSB was I have straight 16 pound on the OSB. Again, I wasn't wanting it to get as deep as it actually could, but I wanted to grind through there and make those fish bite, where I was using 12 pound Shimano Mastiff on the DT6. So that's the cranking setup. We're over halfway done. We got 4 more to go. Let's talk about a drop shot. I do mention that for most of the United States, I do not like throwing weightless plastics during the pre-spawn or before the spawn. Once they're spawning, that's another deal. And then once they're post-spawn, definitely weightless plastics. It seems like I can get away with weightless, you know, Cincos and stuff like that in Florida and down south in really shallow water where those fish live shallow and it never really gets that cold. But it just seemed like pre-spawn, winter, they like something that can fall, you know, falls hard, doesn't sit there for too long. With that said, I have started to put a drop shot into my repertoire, but not as you traditionally would think. The places I've been going have been, as mentioned, very pre-spawn. And if I did find the spawn, the fish were weary. They were skittish. They were scared. I didn't have to get over them with a white bait, and they wouldn't sit there long enough to do that. So when I felt like I had a fish, or I see a little spot, or I see a stump, or I see one on my forward sonar that I think might be spawning, this is what I would throw at them. And it's a little 3/8 ounce blue tungsten weight with a short leader. I'm running 12 pound Shimano Mastiff fluorocarbon. Again, I'm expecting them to be on beds. I'm expecting them to be around stumps, rocks. And I'm using, this is just a little tiny tube right here, the TRD tubes by Z-Man. I really like this thing as a bed bait. One, it looks like a crawdad, looks like a perch, doesn't really matter. But because of this owner hook, this owner cover shot hook, it has a fluorocarbon keeper up there, which keeps the Elastec on there really good and takes up, if I rig it this way, it takes up the whole bait besides the tentacles. It sticks them in the back of the mouth every single time. Again, something that I can just throw. If I am visually watching the fish, I am all for white. I just don't think it matters. If I can see, it's more about watching them eat it. But with this one, it's a natural color. I can pitch it around. Smallmouth, largemouth, spotted bass, doesn't really matter. They get all hooked, and as soon as they eat it, a little bit of pressure, and I got them. I don't have to watch them eat it. Again, just a little leader. You don't want too long of a leader because you want some control, and this Elastec is killer around that because it kind of stays up in their face, sits there, and I can just jiggle it, move that weight, keep the weight in one place if I want, jiggle it, move the bait, make it dart across, do whatever I want to do. My rod is one of my favorites. I've talked about it in probably almost every single What's on My Deck out there. It's one of my favorite spinning rods ever built. The G Loomis NRX Plus 872S jig worm rod. That's 7.3 extra fast medium. Great tip on this rod, tons of backbone behind it. It's a medium, but I'd call it a mag medium. I use this thing so often, and this is going to be no different. 7.3, good enough for pitching around, not too long, not too short, and I'm using a Shimano X-Sense 4000, 10-pound Power Pro SSV2, and as mentioned, 12-pound Shimano Mastiff fluorocarbon. What do we got now? How about a minnow? We talk about minnows a lot. I've been throwing all kinds. I've been talking about them in mine. So I have a big one, I have a middle-sized one, and I have a little one. This one we were using, this is the Z-Man Graph Shads in the 3/16. Very, very unique jig head. It's a line through jig head. I'm gonna try my best to show this to you guys, but I can still utilize my jam. It's a little tricky, but not much once you just kind of look at what you're dealing with there. But you can see here, if I can get my line to slide back up, this is, I don't know if you can see it here, it's kind of hard to get at. You can take my word for it. This is a line through bait, so it doesn't have a line tie on the top like all your traditional jig heads. Instead, it's got a line through. So you run it through the top of the head, out the back, then you can tie your knot. I'm using a jam knot right here. Let's see if you can see that. On the little ring, and this slides back. Slide that back up, and now you have a line through jig head minnow. Extremely unique out there, never seen nothing like it yet. One big thing when it comes to, let me get this off here so I can show you guys. One big thing when it comes to pinging a minnow is keeping your line tie straight. This allows it to dance left to right. It also allows it to sit vertical if you drop it on them. Little bit of a rule of thumb generally. I keep this one right here on the deck at all times. I learned right away when I got this how versatile of a bait it was. It fits that. The tail is killer. Not a lot of companies have that kind of a tail. This thing gets bit. It's perfect size for it. They got great colors and great sizes. I generally use a jig head minnow with, say, like a scented shads, whether it be a small version up to a 7-inch. I generally am casting that at fish. So seeing them off my sonar and casting it at them. A little bit slower fall, a lot more plastic in there. In this case, this one is great at that. That's how I learned that this thing was so versatile. But it's really deadly when they're underneath the boat and I can vertical drop on them, which I'm finding myself catching a lot of walleyes too. But when I get the school going and catch some and they all come to the boat, this thing I just keep right on the rod, ready to go, pull it off the eyelet, let it drop, and boom, start lifting it up fish. Again, this is the 3/16 size. They come in some different colors. The Tennessee shad one, I believe, is one of my favorite colors. Where I just was at Chamberlain on the Missouri River for Shields U, we were just throwing this, casting and reeling. The fish were real shallow. The walleyes were up broadcast spawning, doing their things. Smallies were staging, and this thing was as versatile as throwing a jig and minnow or throwing a jig and paddle tail at them. It just straight catches them. But then again, when we've turned on the forward sonar and got to work, this was a preferred bait for everyone for both smallies and walleyes. My setup, we've talked about it. It's been changing around. I'm still playing with two rods in particular when I'm using these small minnows, and they are both GLXs. It's either the G Loomis GLX 891S jig worm rod, which I have here. Generally more I like to cast with this one. The 841S G Loomis GLX JWR is 7 foot, so it's 5 inches shorter than this one, and I'm using it more generally if I'm just straight got a dropper rod out there like this, dropping a minnow on them vertical. I seem to like that a little bit more. It's quicker to get them out, but at the same time, when I'm keeping them away from the boat, bringing them to it, I like that longer rod, and it just seems like I get better action and I can get them back to the boat better. Here I'm using a Twin Power, the Shimano Twin Power 2500, and I'm just playing with line. This is some old, I think it was 5-pound Power Pro. It was the lightest Power Pro, regular Power Pro I could absolutely find. I've read a lot that red is the color that hides in the water a lot, and I like to use a little bit shorter leaders when I'm throwing a minnow, so I'm just playing with colors and line diameter. This 2500 twin power, their slowest revelations gear ratio reel, essentially lines per inch, lines per crank when you're reeling it in. Sorry, I'm messing this all up. Lines per crank is the slowest of their high end reels, so that's why I use it. I think it's got a lot more forgiveness and still very fast enough once the fish absorbs the bite and actually gets it in the boat. All right, two more. Let's do this since we're on the Shields University kick. I'm going to talk about this setup right here. This is a G Loomis GLX 852S jig worm rod. I just got my hands on this rod. I guide with this a lot in the IMX Pro series. Never let us down. Never broke one. Landed thousands of bass at this point. A lot of my guide clients just really like it. They go home, they end up buying that rod. So I saw it in the GLX. I got one. Big fan. Also, I'm throwing the new Vanford, the Shimano Vanford. All this stuff, you can see it at the Shields here with the sale going on. They have all the Vanfords in stock. I'm using 10-pound regular Power Pro, 12-pound Shimano Mastiff leader, and I'm just using a little swim bait. It is pre-spawn, and like I said, we were in Chamberlain, South Dakota on the Missouri River, and there's smallmouths up shallow, there's walleyes up shallow, and this little guy got it done. I'm just using a little Outcast Tackle Goldeneye. It's a 3/16, so I was also using an 1/8 with either a 1/0 or 2/0 size hook. We're just basically throwing at the bank. No matter where you are this time of year, they are keyed in on little things. Little perch are running around doing their thing. Bass are keyed in. Walleyes are keyed in on little baits. They're up shallow. That's where they want to be. And a paddle tail swim bait, you can turn your forward sonar on, you can turn it off and just start casting. It straight up gets bit, whether you drag it on the bottom or swim it up in the water column. It gets bit. And I just want to show you guys here these Bass Mafia boxes to show you how 3 Bass Mafia boxes full of different size little paddle tails. And with this Shield sale coming up, I believe their little pro swimmers, their little swimmer guys, are all 20% off. All the Shields Outdoors plastics are. Before we get to the very last one, since we're on this topic, Z-Man products, I believe it's 20% off as well. Definitely take advantage, but you can see paddle tails catch fish. I keep 3 boxes of all scattered size of all different colors. Definitely check that out. It's the Shields Outfitter Pro Swimmer. And last but not least, a Senko. We can't go wrong with the Senko. But not quite weightless yet. This is something I kind of started in Florida a little bit. Right here, I'm just using a good old-fashioned Yamamoto Senko. You can't beat the real thing. I'm using an Owner CoverShot HD. So it's just like that CoverShot I was talking about where I was using the Z-Man TRD tube. It has this little fluorocarbon keeper built onto a straight shank. Slides up there nice. I'm just using the smallest little Wu Tungsten weight I could find. I think this is like an 1/8, and I'm just throwing it at really weary fish right now. Over in Wisconsin, chucking it around, throwing it around any areas that I saw fish. We get those matte, it's like a wood, but it's lily pad root or something, and they sit on that and just, that's probably 1 degree warmer, and get tangled up in it and ambush stuff. And this is what I've been throwing around. I'm throwing it on a G Loomis NRX Plus 853C jig worm rod, 7 foot, medium heavy. I'm using a Shimano Metanium XG. Again, I'm using the rod to impart the action, so I want a fast gear ratio reel to pick up the line. Straight 40-pound Shimano SSV2, and I am using, I think this is an 18-pound Shimano Mastiff fluorocarbon leader. And I'm telling you, those days that those fish don't want to pick up those reaction baits that I'm throwing at them, they're not quite ready to spawn yet, but I got it kind of figured out what they're hanging around. I can get them on this. And that's it. We're done. We got through this one. I'm going to bring another one quick because we pushed this one off so that we could coincide a little bit with the Shield sale. So I'll be getting right on it. Mille Lacs, the season opens up Mother's Day weekend, so you know we're going to be tackling a lot of smallmouth, more your Great Lakes style smallmouth, if you will, open water, glacial lakes. And that's it. Hope everyone had a great Easter. Please follow my channel. Please subscribe. Please ask any questions below. I will do my best to answer them. And give me a follow on all social channels at Josh Douglas Fishing. Tight lines.